Hey, welcome to Tent Talk. This is the show all about farmers markets. Whether you're a farmers market manager, a farmer, or a food producer selling at farmers markets, or just a curious farmers market shopper, this is the podcast for you. Farmers markets have operated in communities all over the world for many centuries, and today they're an important element in many small farmers, food makers, and communities' economies. Market operations and regulations continue to evolve, and education and networking with other market organizers is important. In today's episode of Tent Talk, one of our co-hosts, Catt Fields White, will report on her recent visit to the International Public Markets Conference held in London earlier this month. Hi, I'm your host, Bridget Myers. I've spent years as an on-site farmers market manager, and I've done it all from pulling permits to social media marketing.
And I'm Catt Fields White, Director of San Diego Markets, still an active farmers market manager, and founder of Intense Business.
Welcome back to Tent Talk. Today we're chatting with our own Catt Fields White about her recent trip to the International Public Markets Conference. Project for Public Spaces, based in New York City, produces the conference every 2 to 3 years in various locations around the globe. This year's conference was in London, England, my favorite place, and produced with the cooperation of the Mayor of London's office. More than 300 market professionals from all over the world attended, and Intense Business was a supporting partner. Woo-hoo. Welcome back,
Go
Catt.
us.
Go us. Go Intense.
Go Intense. I realized when I was there that in London, they call the canopies that we all operate at in farmers markets gazebos.
Gazebo talk.
So Tent Talk meant nothing to them.
In gazebo business.
I think we're going to have to call it Gazebo Gab.
Gazebo gab.
Welcome to this episode of Gazebo Gab.
Cheerio. I'm going to like that. Gazebos. That's cute.
It's cute.
But that makes me think of those things that people get married under, like in the parks.
True.
That's what I think of.
Sort of the same type of
Because I'm
structure.
American.
That's right.
Oh, that's fun. Well, I'm so excited that you were even talking about Tent Talk, and I hope that people over there are listening to us.
They were
Hello.
listening.
Hello, if you're listening.
It was nice. Yeah.
Yes, I love London. I'm moving there. In my dreams. So how did you decide to travel to London for the International Public Markets Conference? How did that come about?
I've followed Project for Public Spaces, for a while. They do amazing work. They were involved in creating Bryant Park in New York City, and a lot of the big public markets in the U.S. have been supported by Project for Public Spaces. They do a lot of placemaking conferences where they talk about creating green spaces in cities, community gathering places, that kind of thing. So they've been really active with that, and I've always followed them. And they do this public markets conference, but they do it sort of every once in a while. They've done it for a long time, but it's not as though it's every year. So you're never quite sure when it's coming up. It was in Barcelona last time, and had I heard about that early enough, I would have tried to wrangle a trip to Barcelona, but I didn't.
Missed it.
But then when I heard about this one coming up in London, I just thought it would be a really good fit for us. It would be good for us to bring back some of that knowledge to Intense.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to see how that conference went versus how we do the Intense conference. And of course, I love London. And thank you, Norwegian Air, for having such inexpensive flights between Los Angeles and London.
They really do.
They really do. It's
incredible.
crazy.
I know people are always like, "Oh, you're going to London." I'm like, literally, you just went to Chicago and you paid double what I paid to go to London. Excuse me, you just went to Chicago.
I'm going to New York for a meeting in a few weeks, and it's costing me more than it did to get to London.
Ridiculous.
Silly.
Everyone should just go to London.
Yes, let's just go.
Let's just go. So, what was the conference schedule like? And were you listening to lectures or participating in workshops, or what was the deal at the conference?
So we did a little bit of each. We started with opening plenaries, and we heard from the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who's very cool, my current political crush.
Ooh. La la.
Yeah, partly because he just seems like a sensible guy managing a really big city and out there dealing with things, and partly because he's the mayor of this enormous city, and he's established a London Markets Board. He considers markets a big deal in his city, and he's giving them so much support. They've got a huge budget. It's part of the Greater London Authority. They've got a huge staff, people from all over. They've got a woman who's actually from New Jersey that promotes their night markets and night activities in London. And they've got a killer incubator system. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'll get into it in detail. But they really take markets seriously. In some ways, they're not as focused on markets as a farmer's market per se. There's some private organizations in London, kind of similar to ours, that run farmers markets that are really focused on farmers. The city as a whole talks about markets, I think, more in a sense of promoting entrepreneurship, whether it's for farmers or food makers or crafters, makers. But the city itself is just incredibly supportive of them. So that was pretty exciting. So we heard speakers that talked about that, speakers from Project for Public Spaces, some speakers from big public markets in different parts of the world, the Victoria Market in Melbourne, Australia.
Nice.
They presented Eastern Market, the Findlay Market in Cincinnati. Those folks presented. So we did hear some great speeches. We ate in great places. So
As you should.
as you
while
should,
you're
yeah.
there.
So at the Intense conference, one of our things has been that we've always made sure that we held that conference somewhere where we didn't have to eat hotel food. Sorry, hotels. I don't want to dish you, but hotel food meals when they do it on this grand scale, and you see a lot of waste, and the food is not necessarily local food or the freshest food, and that's always been sort of an irksome thing when I go to a small farm conference somewhere or the other food related conferences where you have all these food industry people in the room and you're eating this terrible rubber chicken.
Doesn't seem like it goes together.
Not okay.
No,
Right?
Not okay.
So at this conference, the first day after we attended our first group of speeches, we went over to Borough Market, which is just, you've been there. It's one of the most amazing markets in the world.
My favorite.
Lovely.
Yes.
So we had food vendors supplying our lunches, kind of like we do at the Intense conference. And
Yeah.
we got to shop around and choose the vendors that we wanted to eat from. And they had great local cheeses and vegetables and fruits. And so that was a cool thing.
Yeah, that sounds like so much fun.
Yeah.
Like just as a market conference should be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So over the 3 days, we spent sometimes listening to speeches and sometimes listening to panels where they'd have a variety of people that were market professionals. And then we spent a lot of time either taking the tube to meet people for tours of markets
Yeah.
or getting on a bus and touring around to various markets. So that was awesome.
That's a nice kind of thing to do. I know at Intense, we always talk about like how could we make that happen. We try to have the conference on days where there's not a ton of markets going on so we can have a lot of market people there. But I know people always want to go check out our market. So they go to PB on Tuesday or they come early and come to the Mercado on Saturday. But
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
nice. Yeah, it's nice to just check out markets so you get in the zone. What kind of people were there? I know you said there was people presenting from different areas, but what kind of people were attending and who did you meet?
So it is a public markets conference. So there was a fair amount of people there that were from standing markets. At Intense, we deal with farmers and food makers sometimes that are in standing markets. We don't tend to deal quite so much with the managers of standing markets, just because we tend to talk about the challenges that are involved when you're setting up a market and operating a big event and then closing it back down and going away like Brigadoon, never to be seen again until the following week.
Yeah.
So a little bit different issue. So this conference, a lot of it was people from public markets, but then there were a fair amount of people that were mostly managers of street markets. I didn't talk to a lot of farmers at the actual conference. I talked to some out at the markets in London, or not a lot of food makers, but I talked to an awful lot of other market managers, both from the U.S. and from all around the world. So that was fun. Yeah. And just kind of comparing notes on how we operated versus how they operated, what kind of things their inspectors were looking for, all those things that you address when you're dealing with markets. Lots and lots of commentary on risk management, which is not apparently just an American problem, but a worldwide problem. So there's, a lot of things going on with insurance, and we had a session on developing a security plan for your market in case of emergencies, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I know. We were just talking about that for our markets too, talking about security plans and evacuation and just having like a plan in place, which really hasn't seemed like such a big deal, but lately it's like, oh, we should probably just get something just in case, and no one really wants to talk about it because it's terrible to think about. But as market managers, it's something we need to kind of address because as a market manager, I feel like a responsibility to the group of people who come to shop and the people who are there selling. So in that responsibility, it's like we should kind of have a plan in place.
Have a plan. Think ahead.
Think ahead.
We've got kind of some contingencies just because of the size of staff that we usually use, but I would say even more so maybe in a slightly smaller market, that you would need to make sure that you've got somebody covering each block and that you've got a plan laid out and that you've notified your vendors to be aware of, say, what a certain signal means, that this is a true emergency, this is how you should react.
Yeah, exactly. I know we have a little bit of that, but just kind of laying it all out there and getting clear about it.
Right. We had a session on tech and technology that can be applied to markets, and that was really interesting. It was some that was on social media, some of it on payment methods, some on marketing and how to use other methods to get out there, whether it's group texts or email newsletters. Comes back to the basics. So there was a lot of that, and then various apps, and there were some market managers that loved it. We were really excited about various apps, and then there were other market managers that were there from other places that said, what's wrong with just developing a cookbook? so there was kind of every different level. The other thing that was there a lot was market managers that were not necessarily farmers market managers. It's a big deal in London, is pop-up food markets. And we see those here, mostly in big cities. You look at things like Smorgasburg and things like that around the country where it's not so much farmers, it's a lot of prepared food vendors. And we saw a lot of markets like that in London, lunchtime markets. And I think we see that here in California, of course, we're regulated where even our pop-up lunch markets have to have a couple of farmers so that they can be certified. But in other parts of the country here, that's not the case. And certainly in London, that's not the case. And they definitely consider those viable and valuable markets. They're still called markets because they're providing economic opportunities for food makers and a sense of community gathering places.
Yeah, so more like you said, like public spaces and activating public spaces, bringing communities together and using food as a central way to get them together. Kind of like the First Friday thing we have here with vegan food and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. That exact kind of thing. In fact, we went to Greenwich Market when they were having their all-vegan evening market.
It's all about the vegans.
Tofu fish and chips. I can't remember the name, but it was tofu wrapped with seaweed to taste like fish with French fries. Vegan fish and chips.
That sounds...
It was weird.
Vegan.
And kind of good.
Sounded like tofurkey. I had that. Yeah, that was good.
That kind of idea. Yeah, a lot of that. There's actually a lot of vegan and vegetarian vendors at the markets there, and a lot of vegan and vegetarian restaurants in London. So
we're finding that here as well. So
those are definitely a growing category.
Alike, what are some other ways that those markets are alike, or what's kind of anything really drastically different you heard from or saw while you were there?
I'll tell you what, it's different for me because I run sort of large markets, and we've always approached it from very much a marketing standpoint that one of the primary jobs of a market manager is to get people to the front of those booths. And so for me, ever since we've started, I think a lot of what a manager should be doing is marketing. And what we found at last year's Intense conference, it came up in one of our sessions, and then I found at this conference that especially for smaller markets in smaller towns, or smaller markets in a big city like London for that matter, there's a lot of market managers that are operating either totally unpaid, like totally volunteer staffs, or virtually no pay, just a little bit of a stipend or something. And so we actually had a session where we visited a market, and then we all went into a room, and there were people doing this all over London on that day. We were split up into different groups, and they said, these are our challenges. This market isn't thriving. It's starting to get smaller. We're not getting the same crowds. These are the challenges. We had whiteboards. What would you do about it? And they were pretty much asking us as conference attendees, who were all market professionals, what we would do to change it. And a lot of it came back to, and I was glad that I wasn't the only person who thought that this was a really obvious thing. They were charging next to nothing for fees, for space fees. And that's okay. I understand the idea of wanting to support small farmers and small food makers by not charging them too much. But we added it all up, and if you just charged maybe $6 or $7 extra, or in their case pounds extra per vendor, which would mean one extra sale or less, half a sale for a lot of items, you would have enough money to actually pay your market manager and put some money into marketing, even things as simple as flyers and posters and advertisements and a little bit of staff payment to do social media and that kind of thing. So remaining small because you think you can't afford it or you don't want to increase the fees can be something that just kind of digs you into more of a hole and starts to make your market not get there. So I thought that was really relevant to some of the questions we got from market managers at Intense and that we get when we send out surveys or do the newsletter, the responses that we get back from our followers, that how do you make a small market grow? Well, kind of the same way you make a big market grow. You just need to invest in it. And that means that you as an organizer need to invest, and your farmers and vendors need to plan to invest a little bit more because it pays back in terms of larger crowds and better sales.
Yeah, and I think explaining that to the farmers and vendors instead of just, oh, your fee is going up $5, instead saying, hey, we're launching some new marketing initiatives. We want this market to grow. We want more customers to come. And that's why the extra fee is needed. We're going to take those funds to produce more marketing materials because we have to take the funds that we're collecting now to pay for permitting and insurance and barricades and all the things that markets have to pay for baseline costs to even operate. Then we're gonna, it's gonna be a little bit more expensive. Your fee is $5 or $6 or pounds or whatever, but then to see the ROI on the marketing, I think it's also such a benefit to the farmers and vendors. So just kind of giving them that explanation, and I wouldn't imagine there'd be much pushback. I know when we have conversations with our farmers and vendors, they're like, "Oh, great," and they like that we have a social media presence. I mean, they like seeing ads in magazines, and we go out and work special events and sit in a booth and talk about the market with people there. So it's that kind of thing, and then that's why our markets are busy. So seeing that return is important. Yeah, it's a good conversation to have.
It was a good conversation. We had a conversation with a manager that was running markets, I think in Delaware, and she was saying she was so hesitant to raise a fee because she had taken over a market that somebody else had been operating at a very, very low space fee, but she recognized that they were going to have to invest in more marketing and things to make them thrive. And she said she went back to the farmers and vendors and said, well, we're thinking about raising it this much. And she said the overall response was, I can't believe you didn't raise this sooner. And if I were you, I'd raise it a little more so we can accomplish more. So the farmers and vendors were perfectly willing to take on a little bit more expense in order to have the market more actively marketed and more professionally run in some ways.
Exactly, yeah. And then that's they'll see the difference in their own sales that way. So it's a big, circular investment. So
yeah. I mean, the other ways that they differed is certainly in California, we are more regulated than the average bear.
Yes.
So
indeed.
Yeah, there are some other cities where regulations are also really involved.
Yeah.
But there were some cities too that we were talking to, both American and overseas, where the regulations were much more relaxed. I guess not as many regulatory agencies, not as strict an oversight of maybe the additional food laws. There were a lot of people in London. So London had an interesting system where we have our cottage food system here where you can only make certain things in a home kitchen. There, they were doing a lot of things in a home kitchen. But the home kitchens were being inspected just like the restaurants or commercial kitchens. And, the letter grades that we get on restaurants here, they have a hygiene grade that goes from 1 to 5. And they would get that even as a home kitchen, following essentially the same standards as the restaurant or commercial kitchens did. And one of the managers there was saying, what we've started doing recently is making everybody put their little plaque up that says whether their hygiene rating is a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And because especially some of the newer vendors had a 5, he said that would make the older vendors get sort of competitive and think that they needed to increase their hygiene and their,
I would hope so.
Right? Yes, we'd hope that everybody would be a number 5 in terms of food safety and hygiene anyway. But it was an interesting thought that to make that something that you'd compete for. Yes, let's have clean food.
And your friends come to the market and they're like, given, you have a 3, I'm not coming over to your house for dinner.
Exactly.
Your home kitchen. Funny.
Wait, your home kitchen got a 2? Ew.
My kids can't come over, actually. I'm sorry.
So I thought that was interesting.
Interesting
That was different.
Yeah, that would be, I don't know. I think the restaurants, they have to have an A here, right?
No, I think they give A, B, and C's.
Ooh.
Ooh.
But no one wants to hang that C in the window. I wouldn't go in there.
Really, they kind of hide it behind the closed sign.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, interesting. Oh, so that's different there. That's nice to figure out different systems too, even if it wouldn't it wouldn't be regulated in the same way here. Just to know those different systems that are happening over there.
And then they're fine.
Yeah, and they're fine.
Everybody seems fine.
Everyone's alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the things that were similar, which I thought was hilarious, and in fact was just talking to another group of California market managers about this on Tuesday, is that here I am in an international conference, a bunch of market managers, lots of them from all over the U.S., lots of them from other parts of the world, and I'm talking to a market manager from Latvia, and one from Hong Kong, and one from upstate New York, and one from Chicago, and everybody's complaining about dogs at the market.
Oh my goodness. We could all just get together. We could have a whole conference about dogs
at the market.
Dog talk. That's
Dog
our next podcast.
That's
no,
right.
No dog talk. That's
right.
what it's called.
No pets talk.
No pets talk. Okay.
No pets talk. Service animals are a thing. But
Service animals welcome.
everybody had that issue.
Interesting.
Either that they didn't want to have to regulate dogs, but their health department said they had to, or they did want to regulate dogs, and they either had regulations that they were having a hard time enforcing, or there wasn't a regulation that let them enforce. And most people had the same attitude that we see many market managers here have, which is we all love dogs. We don't want anybody tripping over leashes. So this is a challenge.
We all love dogs, but a lot of dog owners are careless, for lack of a better word. Don't get me started on dogs.
And here we go.
We'll
now get 17 emails from dog owners reminding us that strollers are also a hazard at farmers markets. You know it's going to start.
Yikes! Here it comes.
Here it goes. Phone's ringing now.
I'll try to hold myself back. Okay. I love dogs. They're so cute.
They are cute.
Not when they're licking the food on the stand at the market.
Ew.
No.
Okay, that doesn't happen.
No, that would never happen. Well, that's good to hear, though, that we're not alone. That's nice. Well, on that note, I feel like we were just talking to Sarah at the Phoenix Public Market about the same thing, too, and other market managers that have come to Intense Conference. We're kind of like in our own little world as market managers, and it's really nice to just get with your own people.
That's true.
Wherever that may be. So, like, conferences, just getting together on the podcast. It's always so nice to just be like, oh, I don't feel so crazy that I'm, like, having a hard time with this. Or, oh, you do this system? That's so great. And, learning from each other. And
that was huge. I mean, that was really a huge thing at this gathering, was that people from all over the world had slightly different perspectives, but I kept hearing over and over and over whenever we were at a reception or chit-chatting between sessions or something, people saying, oh, it's so good to be with somebody who understands. Yeah. So, our job is weird. We say that around our office all the time. And that's the case for all market managers. And of course, it applies in any industry. I'm sure when chemical engineers get together, they say, oh, my people, you understand me. But I mean, that's exactly how everybody felt at this conference was, oh, you know what I mean when I say I love dogs, but, or, you know what I mean when I say, all about food safety, but why is the inspector picking on this person for that? So it was a really fun feeling to be amongst the market tribe.
Why do people park their cars in front of no parking signs?
Well, aside from dogs, that's the other universal thing is towing cars.
If someone could figure out how to get people to read no parking signs, that'd be great.
This was funny. We were at a market in London, relatively narrow street, booths on one side of the street and on the other side. I was just in the midst of asking, just out of curiosity, asking the manager there, do you have a lot of problems with towing cars? When a car drove through, apparently they're not allowed to tow cars, and they just let the cars drive through the market.
Yikes! While people are shopping?
With the customers there, and the customers seemed to be used to it. They just leapt out of the way.
I'm so confused. I need to, I was going to say I need to go to this market, but I don't want to go to that market.
It was kind of a scary thing.
It's
interesting. They said in this borough, they don't make us tow cars, and they won't let us restrict traffic, and yet they chose that location for a market. Yeah, that was a little bit baffling. That one actually.
And yet people shop there.
And people shop there.
I mean, my dad went to a market in Vietnam where they went on either sides of a train track, and then people were shopping, and then when the train
I've heard about this.
People scooted their stuff back. And just the train went through, and then they just scooted back towards. I was like, what? He sent me a video. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. It was so crowded, and everyone was just cool with that.
Yeah, they're just, okay, here comes the train.
Here comes the train. Back. They'd scoot their little overhang on their canopies back so the train wouldn't smash it to smithereens. I don't know.
I mean, that's the power of markets, isn't it? People will do anything to shop at a market.
Gotta shop.
Gotta shop at a market.
Risk it all.
Gotta do business at a market.
They're gonna risk it all.
Markets aren't new.
No.
The regulations and operations keep changing, and so that's what's so cool about educational stuff like this is that you can keep up and learn how to get even better at what we do. But, I mean, the fact is, markets are a thing that have been there since people gathered in cities of any kind.
So they just had to make do, and I'm sure when they see our markets and we're towing cars and putting barricades up, they think it's we're so hoity-toity with our markets.
Right.
Barricading the street, they're probably oh, relax.
Yeah, calm down.
Calm down.
But yeah, markets are universal.
Funny.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're
That's
wonderful.
what's so nice about going abroad too.
It is.
Checking out the markets, all different ways, and they just make it happen.
They do. one way or another.
Society.
It's
Yeah.
cool.
What kind of ideas did you bring back from the market to help our intense listeners or our own markets? Anything
Well,
brewing?
we've talked about a few. Some of the tech stuff was interesting. There's still a lot of people collecting fees at markets. There's a lot of people that have really good ideas, like MarketWorks and those kind of folks that on moving some of that to online. We're getting a little bit less analog in the market world, so that's cool. Yeah, it's happening. Obviously, social media and all those kinds of ways that people promote things, that's getting a little bit more interesting. I was actually really inspired, and I know that there's some good incubators, some in San Francisco, some in New Hampshire. They're forming all over. Food Corridor has some cool stuff going on with food incubators.
Yeah.
But again, Mayor of London's office is actually doing that as a civic thing. So they have a whole program called Tomorrow's Markets. And how we always talk about how we're aging out and the farmers are getting, the average age of farmers now is 56 or 57. And so we're always trying to get new farmers to start. They're making a very concerted effort on a civic level, actually governmental for the city of London itself, to encourage young people to come in as food makers or as farmers. So they're giving them education, they assign them a mentor, they put them through kind of sort of like we do with Vendor 101, but even a longer program of business education. They do little focus groups for them to apprise their products, and they give them some money. They invest in them, and then they have to meet certain guideposts along the way and say that they've gotten this done in time and they've gotten their business plan to this level and they've got their samples ready for the group to look at. But it's a really organized system. I'd love to see us investing more in young vendors and young farmers here.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant.
It does. Brilliant.
Brilliant.
Delightful.
That sounds, very interesting. I like that. I like that idea. Because I feel like a lot of people need that. And if we just kind of gave everybody just a little help, it could just, really, fulfill a lot of needs in the marketplace for those kind of businesses. So,
yeah. And I think a lot of market managers that we deal with, do that on their own informal level.
Absolutely.
That's one of the things that I think we all consider part of our job is nurturing new vendors and new farmers and helping them move along and kind of critiquing their displays and giving them ideas about what they can do to make their sales better. So I think all of us do it, but it was just pretty impressive to see the city actually investing in that.
Well, because I know people have told us to before, and we teach the class and we help at the markets, but it's like we're also operating the farmers market, so it can't be our full-time job to do that, to nurture and kind of help and be there and support fully. So they have to do some of it on their own, and then we help them a lot, or they take the class with us. So it's nice to have someone where it's just dedicated to that and not also running the markets and everything, but a whole little dedicated system for that.
Right.
That sounds very amazing.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
And met some young people that were part of that.
Yeah.
Including some folks who thought that they had the cleverest product in the world because it was fermented vegetables called kimchi. And I said, we've heard of that before.
Brand new.
They were very excited. And they were excited about it because the wife's last name was Kim and the husband's last name was Chi.
Well, maybe they were the first couple who had that situation that was making kimchi.
Could be.
Is that why they named it that? They didn't know that actual kimchi
They kind of seem to not
existed?
know.
What's happening? Let's have them on the podcast.
They were adorable.
I need to talk to them right now.
So excited.
Let's call them.
It was funny.
Oh, that's funny. Speaking of interesting people, who else did you meet that was interesting there? What was your favorite session, and who's going to come on the podcast with us now?
Well, I did meet I have a whole bunch of new best friends.
Lovely.
That we're going to get on the podcast.
As you get when you travel, anywhere you go.
I do. I like to meet people and see what they're up to. So one of the things that we've got when we did our most recent survey is we got a bunch of requests, a fair amount of requests, and we heard the same thing at Intense. From some market managers that said, hey, we're not all in Portland or San Diego or big cities. How do we treat small markets? So there's a woman that's in upstate New York with Morning Glory Markets, Pascal Ledrulec, who was really wonderful, new best friend.
Oh, BFF.
Right? She runs now, I want to say 5 markets,
Oh.
but they're all small. One of her first markets started, she said she kind of fell into the farmer's market business, as one does, because they had a really small market in her community. It was about 15 vendors. It was doing okay, but it wasn't thriving. She had been a food writer, had some experience with restaurants and chefs, and and food. And so the town council asked her to take over this market, and she expanded it. And it's a strong little thriving market, but I think it's still only 32 or 33 vendors. And then she has 4 other markets that she manages in other communities around that same basic upstate New York area that are all about that size.
Yeah.
25 or 30. So I think she has some expertise that we don't have as our managers of really big markets. So we're definitely going to get her on the podcast. We've still got Erin coming up, who was at Intense last year, because we're hearing some stories about sponsorship needs and how to fund markets. So
yes,
we want her to come on.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Hurwitz, who's with Green Markets New York City. I think we'd like to have him talk to us on our podcast and maybe come out to the Intense conference next year. We're going to try that.
I love those markets.
Those markets are amazing.
They're
so like the
great.
market in Union Square
Yeah.
and some of the other markets in New York, they have, I will say, for America, a really strong program of supporting new farmers and new vendors and helping them grow their businesses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have a great Instagram too. It's so funny.
They do.
It's one of my favorite farmers market Instagrams.
Yeah. Great marketing,
Mm-hmm.
great nurturing. So
yeah.
We'd like to have him come talk to us. Richard McCarthy, who ran the markets in New Orleans for a long time and is with Slow Food now. I got to meet him, and I think we'll try and get him onto the podcast. Lee and her team out at the market at Pepper Place in Birmingham.
Oh, lovely, yeah.
Yeah, I think she'll be able to talk to us some about a trend that we're seeing where markets that were seasonal because of the weather, both in terms of growing seasons and in terms of just managing a market when it's snowy out. And I know we know the people in Seattle are laughing at us, but still, we're seeing a lot more of those markets go to year round by doing things like finding indoor spaces where they can move in the winter, that kind of thing. So we'll have her chat with us about that. And might be interesting to talk to Hazel or one of the people at the London Markets Board about the programs they do for tomorrow's markets. I think we might want to have them on and talk about ways that that's working for them and that maybe we can replicate. Whether or not we can get our cities behind it, maybe we can replicate within the farmers market profession.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Can we fly there and do a live podcast there?
I'm thinking that would be the most efficient way to do it, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I suppose I'll go there.
That's what I'm thinking.
Places. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like a very successful, great time.
It was.
And yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Intense is spreading. But now we have to call it in gazebo.
In gazebo or in canopy, or
In canopy.
That's the trick. You know, they use a lot of different names for those pop-up structures.
Call it, yeah. I know. Even my husband the other day, we were going to the park, and he was like, "Yeah, grab a canopy." I'm like, "Call it a tent. Come on." He's like, "I can't. I'm sorry."
Huh.
So yeah,
Wow. Branding fail.
Well, branding fail. This is a good lesson. We could talk about this.
It's a good lesson.
It's all right.
Talk
We'll
about
figure
how
it
you
out.
decide to name your business.
We'll figure it out.
That's all right.
It's good.
It was good. But yeah, it was great. In fact, I was talking to a guy that was from college, I want to say in Indiana. I may be getting the state entirely wrong, but he was excited about Intense, but he was saying, do you videotape the conference? Can we just watch it remote? And I said, well, you know, we're discussing different ways that we can get the material out for people that can't make it to the conference. But it was funny that he was saying that because 5 minutes before that, we had all been discussing, standing around talking about how incredibly valuable it was to be in a room with other people that were in your business. So even if you watched the presentations, you would never get the benefits that you get from talking to the market manager sitting next to you or talking to the farmer on the break that's doing something that you want to do and how to extend your growing season and that kind of thing. So there's just definitely value in getting people together. You know, we're working on adding some online education and things to the Intense program, but still we'll never stop doing the conference because having people in the same room is just so valuable.
Absolutely. As market people, we know that, right? We say, like, come to the market.
Right.
Because there's no replacement. Like, there's nothing you can do that's going to compete with speaking to the farmer face-to-face and shopping with your community and getting out there. Right. So the same kind of thing.
Yeah. So the ideas of doing online farmers markets, air quotes, that make me so cranky when people use that name. It's not a farmer's market if you're delivering online. You know, it could be a good thing, getting healthy people, getting healthy food to people by online ordering and delivering and that kind of thing, but it's not a farmer's market. A farmer's market is where you get to meet your farmer.
Yeah. Sprouts.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope they're listening. Anyways.
So that's that.
Oh, it sounds so wonderful.
That's fun.
Yeah. Next time I'm inviting myself.
All right.
Although I don't know who's going to run the markets if we're both there.
That's true. That's the trick, isn't it? Highly suggest Doesn't have to be going to London. It doesn't have to be the international conference, but and obviously it doesn't have to be intense, although that's a good idea. But I highly recommend going to this kind of thing where you can meet other people in your business.
Yeah, I think it has to be intense.
You think so? Okay. It does have to be intense.
It does. All right, well, that's a good combo.
Yeah.
I liked it. I know everyone was wondering. A lot of people at the market, at our markets, were asking a lot of questions about it when we were gone. So
yeah,
now I'm going to direct them to this episode.
Excellent.
I answered as best I could, but I really didn't know exactly what you were doing over there. So now I know.
Now you know. Other than working on market maps late at night.
Yeah, well, getting emails at 2 in the morning.
For me. Yeah. Nighttime for you.
It was fun. All the staff would get together in the morning and say, "Oh, how many emails did you get from Catt 2 in the morning?" Of course, it wasn't your 2 in the morning, but
right.
Our 2 in the morning.
I tried to be careful.
Yeah, that's okay. Emails are emails. All right, well, our wrap-up question can be very pertinent to this conversation. I think, well, there's only 2 of us, so we can just ask each other.
This will be quick.
This will be quick. Let's tell everyone where in the world our favorite markets are.
Well, right this minute, my favorite markets are in London. Because I just, and Little Italy, San Diego.
That's right.
And Portland. And I actually did make a stop in France because it was on the way.
France is on the way to everywhere that Catt goes, actually.
If I could manage it. Yeah, so they were great. Barcelona, I don't know.
That was a long answer.
Okay, never mind.
Okay.
I don't have one.
You
what
don't
are
have
your favorite
one.
markets?
Okay, well, you know that I love Borough Market. It's my favorite place in the world. Ever. And I want to go there every day.
All right. In London.
I really love it. It's in London. But also, I really liked that market that we went to when we went on that bike ride to Giverny's Garden. And we, stopped off in that town. What was it called?
Vernon.
That market was so cute.
It was
cute. Little, and it had kind of, tchotchke stuff on one side of it. But then it had actual farmers in their booth selling
lots
amazing things. Because sometimes the markets in Paris, even, they can resell produce. Mm-hmm. So there's
That's true. That's true in London too.
Yeah, it's true in a lot of places, I think. So there's the produce with the stickers on it, which always makes me want to cry. But that's how they do it there. But there was actual farmers there, and they had the most interesting fruits because it was springtime, and the cheesemongers and the butchers and everything. And it was just a small little town, looked like it was in a storybook, one of those towns with little castles and things, and just a great market. Yeah. And it was the perfect day, so I think maybe that helped.
Yeah, beautiful day out.
My baguette sandwich. But yeah, Borough Market is the best, except for Little Italy and Pacific Beach. Okay, this is a long question.
Yeah, long answers.
Yeah, all right. Well, thanks a lot, Catt. Thanks for joining us. Thanks
for
joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. You're welcome anytime when you're in town. And thanks everyone for listening. All you listeners, we really appreciate you. Please leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play or wherever you're listening to this podcast, because that's just how podcasts work. If you review and rate us, other people find us and they pop up in other people's feeds. And then everyone can say, what's a tent if they live in London? And then they'll get really curious and click on it and say, oh, a gazebo, and then listen to us. So please review and rate us and tell us how you liked today's episode. Give us feedback. You can always shoot us an email. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast. That always helps as well. Helps us as well as you. I know when I have other podcasts, when I subscribe, I'm really grateful because it reminds me every week to listen because I'm forgetful like that. So subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And for more farmers market tips, tricks, and information, subscribe to our weekly newsletter at intensebusiness.com. And remember, that's INTENTS business.com. And follow us on Instagram at intensebusiness. And tell us what else Intense Business can do for you by taking our survey this week. You can do that anonymously or introduce yourself for a chance to win Intense swag and conference registration. Find this month's survey at that'sintense.com. And remember, that's INTENTS.com. This podcast is produced by Intense Business, where passion meets profit. Today's episode was recorded by Bridget Myers and Adam Samaha and edited by Justine Marzoni Mead. Original music by David Mead. Special thanks to our guest, Catt Fields White. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you to San Diego Market. So thank you again.
Thank you.